I'm very pleased to welcome my guest today. She was the first councillor for the newly formed Doon Pioneer Park ward in 1997 for the City of Kitchener. 3 years later, in 2000, she ran for regional council for the region of Waterloo, and she was successful. She was re-elected in 3 successive elections before, with 20 minutes to deadline, she decided not to run in the 2014 municipal election. We shared space on the regional horseshoe from 2010 to 2014, and we were seatmates at the Grand River Conservation Authority during that same time. We didn't always agree on issues, but I appreciated very much her experience and especially her strong commitment to heritage in Waterloo Region. And as we will learn today, she's been an advocate for the protection of our heritage long before it was considered in vogue. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome to the Old Grey Mares podcast my friend, Jean Haalboom.
Thanks, Rob.
Jean,
glad to be here.
I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to have you here. Now, I just want to say I've been meaning to get you on, and I was thinking about what we could talk about. And one thing that came to my mind recently was there was in the news about the unveiling of the new statue at the front in Waterloo. It was the Barrel of Monkeys statue. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. It's down by the old brick brewing by the Bauer Flats and condo. And because I remember the discussions at council about the creative enterprise initiative and some of those issues and heritage. And then I thought, just recently we were talking about in the news about the bunker,
Right.
Which I had no idea there was a bunker. So now it made me think I was one of the ones that wasn't going to be included if there's something was happening because I wasn't told. And I thought, there's a heritage project potential, interesting potential that we could talk about. But then you and I got talking in advance of this podcast about some stuff, and the things we chatted about, which about your involvement in various issues in the region prior to even 1997, I think are so interesting that's really probably going to be the focus of our time today, and we'll talk about these other things another time.
All right.
But Jean, just let's start off. Why don't you tell me what have you been up to just in the current time since leaving the region?
Since 2014.
Yeah.
Well, I continue to have calls from neighborhoods who have similar difficulties and challenges that I have experienced over the years before my life in politics. And what kind of advice, what kind of neighborhood activity is needed. So I continue to get those and sit in on, shall we say, the development neighborhood committees of the inner city. And then, so that's one focus, and also heritage projects. I'm a member of the executive board for the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, with its headquarters in Toronto.
Right.
And I was asked to be part of that group because of my political experience.
Yes.
And how could architecture gain more success provincially with legislation, how to do that. Yeah. And then what else the first thing that I did, my granddaughter was 1 year old, and my daughter had to go back to, or wanted to go back to work, of course. And so would I, do childcare? And I thought, well, I'm a retired teacher. I know about primary education.
Yes.
Why not? So I did that for 6 months, then took a break. And then the next one came along, another granddaughter.
Oh, congrats.
And another 6 months. I did that, and of course gardening, and so I thought I better have something good to say, like how have I spent my time? I've spent my time reading like biographies and about the Cold War and things of those books, and Dresden. And since 2014, I have read 100 books.
Wow, good for you. Well, I know. Alex is a big supporter of the library, the Kitchener Library, as all of us are, and
Yes.
it's a great resource. So I've no doubt you're making good use of that. You know, it's interesting. The first part of what you talked about, which is the community groups reaching out to you and the provincial organization reaching out to you, because this is really what the podcast is predominantly about.
Right.
It's reaching out to our retired politicians and trying to gain information and background information about various things they were involved with and what led to the success or
Right.
not success of a situation. And hopefully people who are listening to the podcast will get some idea about what they need to do in order to have success in any activity or cause that they're working on. And what was interesting to me was when we got talking about your situation, because I said, so a common question is, well, how did you get involved in politics? So let me just put that one out there to you. How did you get involved in local municipal politics?
So involvement came before getting your name, Councillor Jean Haalboom.
Yes, yes. Oh yeah,
Before
we were talking
1990.
we're talking about community grassroots involvement.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I would say that it started back in my days when I was in Toronto. And my husband's going to law school, and I'm teaching, and then we're always trying to find a place to live. And it seemed I was always 1 foot in front of the bulldozer.
I suppose it's better than 1 foot somewhere else, as the saying goes.
And so what really surprised me were these beautiful houses who probably were made for middle income people in the south of Eglinton, around St. Clair and Yonge. And honestly, Rob, I had never seen such beautiful houses. The interiors, like wood paneling and
Yeah.
built-in libraries.
These are historical type buildings,
yes,
residences.
but even like the architectural design, just
Yes.
for the, any like people who live there.
Right.
And then I started to take courses at University of Toronto. I'm teaching, but I'm also having to finish a degree by part-time. And I was very lucky at University of Toronto to take urban geography
Yes.
and architecture. And we had projects. Like one of them, and this doesn't say about how I got involved, but anyway, it leads up. The involvement. So one of the profs that I had was involved in helping the neighborhood groups stop the spadina, and as you know, it stops.
Big issue in Toronto
yes.
in the 70s.
And that was to go, it was going to smash right through those old neighborhoods along Spadina and then dump all the traffic out on Queen Street. And just like any American city you find today.
Right.
And more expressways and so on, like really mess up. And so those people in the neighborhoods, they got together and then all of a sudden they enlisted and enrolled these urban geography profs and architecture profs and formed the group. And I would say that each solution is its own. So you really have to know what the issues are and say politicians, what their feeling is.
But let me ask you though, I want to get into the specifics. So what were you doing as you were in this class? Your prof is involved with this Stop the Spadina. What is the sort of activities that you're doing as a student?
All right. Well, Stop the Spadina, it's going to bring hundreds of thousands of cars. So we wanted to find, we did traffic counts. And how do you do traffic counts? And where do you do the traffic counts? And then how do you write a brief? And who do you tell? And what kinds of information do you share? And also you're looking at the communities that are existing along those routes.
Right.
Little communities like, and if Jane Jacobs had just arrived in town.
Did you meet Jane Jacobs?
In class.
Oh,
she
nice.
came
Wow.
and talked. And she was the one who had said, oh, I think maybe she had lived out in a suburb, and then she just had to move back inside. And as you know, she had been involved with, I'm trying to think of who the politician was there, wanted to put all these roads through New York and so on. And
Right.
so she shared some of her expertise for how you do this. But what is the worst thing about these roads? They destroy and disrupt these existing communities, like the little shops you have, like sort of
Yes.
small village communities, and those give the the
Right.
wonderful the
So each
excess-
neighborhood is like a village within the city. It's
Absolutely.
unique. So what I'm gathering from what you're
Yes.
saying is that you're out there getting fact-based information
Right.
to be able to present to who?
could be politicians, but I sense, and I'm not too sure of the political situation in Toronto at the time, because there was, a higher level of government.
Yeah, we don't need to know the specifics about that. It was
but
more the
in
process.
other words, there are all these different levels of politicians that you come out with, and it wasn't just, it was a mix of people, because there were people from, say, the Forest Hill neighborhood, which was, very established.
Right. We have
type of
different
thing.
neighborhoods,
Different
different socioeconomic levels.
socioeconomic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there were people from all aspects, all levels of people pitching in
Right.
and talking to people, sharing it. And of course, I think the media probably paid attention. That's the other thing you really need, is a very good story,
Yes.
something that catches the attention.
Right.
And what are the stories that are associated with those neighborhoods that you need to protect?
Right. Right. And ultimately, the organization was successful.
Right. Actually, I was just on the periphery, Rob.
Yeah. Yeah.
But-
No. I know that you're a
Yes.
student, but
Yes.
but you're aware of what's going on.
That's right.
You're seeing what's happening.
That's right.
You're not the main proponent,
No.
of course, but like all people, you're learning through experience.
Yes.
And that experience, I mean, and what a unique experience you were able to be a part of.
Right.
So after that experience in Toronto, eventually you made your way out to Waterloo Township.
Well, into Kitchener.
Yes.
Living in a high rise and looking around and seeing beautiful homes in the inner city, say on Erin Street, and I'm trying to think what the other one, Roy Street.
Yes. In Kitchener, yes.
And vacated, and then also houses had been destroyed for, I guess, the major project, like regional headquarters or center in the square, or it was like arts community, but houses were being bought up by the speculators again.
Yeah.
Similar.
Right.
And looking around and
Similar to what you saw in Toronto, is that what you mean?
Absolutely. And then the people who had lived in those houses, the families, they had moved to places like, I'm trying to think, like Beechwood and Westmount.
Right.
And
The suburbs.
suburbs, so to speak, and so we're left with the catch of the development industry, and so I'm thinking, oh, well, now I have to find a home. So where will we go? And we've ended up finding one in Doon.
Yes. So just before we get to Doon, I just want to say your comments about the downtown. It's very similar to, if you ever listened to the Richard Christie podcast, he had a very similar experience coming from Toronto, looking for an area. He wanted to be downtown. He wanted to be in an older home. He lived on Erin Street.
He did.
Yeah. So he very much appreciated that from his Toronto experience as well.
And I will say, being around and knowing Richard as a councillor, he had a very tough go
Yes.
protecting that neighborhood
Yeah.
and rejuvenating it.
Yes, and that was what was basically propelled him, so to speak, to run for council, and he'll tell us how he ran against Merv Villamere at the time, and how that ended up for him. But so, what did you find in Doon then? The home you bought.
The home that we bought.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps I could share this. My husband determined that he would like to set up his law practice.
Okay, but I was more like, what's the age of the home and the heritage of the home?
In Kitchener home, the condition was that we find an old home
Yes.
with some history.
Yes.
And we found it in Doon.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
sort of how I ended up in Ayr. My wife was looking for an older home. We were living in Waterloo, and I came home from a golf weekend, and she told me I found the place we're moving to, and it was an old church manse in Ayr. So that's where we've been since '93.
Right. All right. So, what was so good and significant? What was the attraction about this house? It belonged to Moses Billings Perrine, who was one of the Perrine brothers who started the Doon Twine and Flax Mill in Upper Doon in 1853, 1856.
Okay.
Now, I always say this was his last hurrah, because he had homes in Conestoga, and then they moved to and built this particular house. But,
Okay.
and it was built 1884. It was later in life.
Yeah.
And so it's an Italianate house with lots of brackets under the eaves and bay windows and interesting brickwork and interior high ceilings.
I think Doon is a hidden gem in our community in terms of heritage buildings. You know, the Homer Watson Gallery and that general neighborhood, because you're near the Homer Watson Gallery, correct?
I am near the birthplace
Yes,
of Homer Watson.
birthplace.
But before Homer Watson Boulevard split up Doon in Lower and Upper Doon, the Homer Watson Gallery would have been, probably a kilometer or so away, and you would have just taken the road over there and so on.
There's some people that'll use the word Waterloo for Waterloo in their commentary. But so you're in this area. You found the place, and you've been there ever since, correct? You're still
November 1976.
right. And when I asked you what was your first involvement in local politics, you talked about some line on an official plan.
Right. So here it is, November 1976, move in, and then all of a sudden 1977 rolls around and there's an official plan for the city of Kitchener being circulated and approved, and generally you would look at the script of the plan.
Yes.
And you would look at what are the policies and what rules. And there is a section at the back of the plan where everybody should look. And you might think, oh, why? But those are the maps. And those are the schedules. And those are the ones that you really have to pay attention to, which we learned, because what is in the script then is more identified and expanded upon in the schedules.
And what did you see in the schedule?
And there was, on the schedule, Doon Village Road, identified as a collector road.
And what's the significance of a collector road?
So it collects traffic, it collects cars. Now,
Is it like a main artery?
yes, I would say that.
Okay.
It definitely is. Although at the regional level, you have arterial, which is one higher,
Okay.
like a Homer Watson Boulevard. But Collector Road is pretty much getting there.
Can have a significant impact in a neighborhood.
It could, and the significant impact that was pending
Yes.
was the fact that Monarch Development had now owned, or was the owner of 1,200 acres
Oh.
south of us, which was in the development area.
And this collector road was to get access to that development?
Yes.
From where?
So
Homer
you would-
Watson or
It could, yes, it could have been, but really, it came from Doon Village Road, hooked in from Kitchener.
Okay.
And so you'd come down Doon Village Road, and then there was another little road side road off Doon Village Road, which is Oregon. And so this is going to be their road into the new suburb.
Okay. And you were made aware of this because I guess you received notice as a homeowner in the area where it would have been impacting you.
Once the plan of, I don't even know if it was plan of subdivision or exactly what it might have been, but there was, it came about somehow. And of course, the neighbor lady who had been in the area much longer than us, but had been very active at the time of Homer Watson Boulevard going in, found out about it because she was the community contact and phoned us. And then so Doon Village Road hooks on to Homer Watson Boulevard. So guess what? We're now the ring road.
But what was the significance of this road to you? It was going to have some impact, wasn't it, on your property?
Now we have a tar in front of us is a tar and chip road existing when we came.
At the time, yeah.
Tar and chip road, maybe 20 feet, what would I say, across. The road surface would be max 20 feet across. And so collector road means curbs, gutters, widen, boulevards, you name it. And if you now have a road widened, you find that the edge of it is going to go up against my porch, and the neighbor lady across the road, their house is another Perrine house, an earlier one, and it was like 10 feet off that surface. So the road would have gone right through her living room, plus every other house along that road.
So this required a call to action on your part.
You could say that.
So take us through the process on dealing with this issue, because I'm presuming today, is there a collector road in front of your property?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about how you were able to deal with this issue in order to get it changed.
Well, if I were in a neighborhood where this is happening, I would really get to know my neighbors.
Yes.
And I would get to know people who could speak with other neighbors to tell them the plight of the situation. And talk about it, talk about what the impact will be, what the seriousness of this is going to be. Because if I, and even there were people, not in the immediate neighborhood, but outside, if you told them that there's, 1,200 acres of, a subdivision with 1,300, 2,000 homes
Yep.
that are going to be built, and then also having friends who are engineers said, you realize that each home means 10 car trips per day.
Okay.
So now you take 10 car trips
Right.
times 1,200, and that means about 20,000 cars.
So initially then what you're doing is you're raising people's consciousness. I'm not going to say sounding the alarms, but raising
Awareness.
their awareness of what is happening and what could potentially happen.
Right.
Because you need
Understanding.
to galvanize that community support.
Right. And there was more traffic coming down the road, and as it was. And so something needed to be done about it. And then we needed to have a way to deal with the developer, how we would come before City Hall, how would we come with the planning department. And so we formed a group.
What was it called?
And we figured we are rural. That's what we want to represent. So let's think about Society for the Preservation of Upper Doon, SPUD.
Spud, like a potato. Warts and all.
You take it. and then we formed our community group, and Spud always was speaking, and
So you almost, it's like you're applying what you learned on the Spadina issue. Like you took was it a fact-based approach? What were some of the key issues that you were focusing on in order to convince the developer? The city? Was it the city or the region at the time that you were dealing with this?
it was mainly the city.
Okay.
So, the planning department, and also looking at a new secondary plan. That was also, so there were many facts. However, what we found that we had to do some promotion to help the broader community, and this is really when you're trying to, as a neighborhood group, to help to gain support
Yes.
publicly, you have to reach out, and what do you need for promotion? And so there were a couple things that happened in 1979. The Heritage Committee, Municipal Heritage Committee, or LACAC, Local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee,
Yes.
was formed, and they did an inventory of historic homes. So I had access to the historic homes in our particular area. And so I would do presentations at the local library. I do little walking tours and raise information that way.
This is like Open Doors back in the 70s.
It was. And then also 1984 came along, and we had hooked, which was the bicentennial year. There was the Pioneer Park, which started development in 1969, but those were new people. And they'd come out elsewhere, and they knew about our heritage, and they were so impressed, and we need to do something. And we told them how we were
As you
being
made them
attacked.
aware, they started to appreciate more.
Right, and
Yes.
also they understood what that would mean with 12, maybe 1,500 homes
Right.
behind us. So, what can we do? Well, one thing was a community newsletter, and I said I offered to write a little story
Yeah.
about this old house
Okay,
in
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and to talk about our area, and that was circulated to the
The neighborhood?
the neighborhood,
Doon?
and over all of Doon and Pioneer Park, and
So
it was
let me
quite-
just step back for one
Yeah.
second, because this is 84. This Spud came to be in around
84.
In 84. Okay. You became aware of this line in the schedule in
77.
77. Okay. So there was no rush to get things changed, because like the city was not saying, well, this is going to be finalized by, in 6 months or something like that.
Well, I believe what we kept impressing upon City Council whenever we could was we'd make presentations, and I can't remember how many of those were, but there were a group of us from there, and we'd impress upon them how the traffic was increasing, and this is a local road, and something needed to be done.
Did you have champions on city council?
Maybe one or two really had some feeling for. You didn't have I don't think we had the ward system then.
Okay.
There might have been one or two, caring about the heritage and so
Right,
on.
right.
So, let's see. So I'm going to go back to get promotion, as I made doing the talks and
Yep.
presentations and petitions and things like that. And then, so 1984 rolls around, it's the bicentennial year, there's money, and Pioneer, the community association said, well, let's have a birthday bash. And we'll bring in the heritage of the area. And we'll celebrate with the theme 200 for Ontario, 150 for Doon, and 15 for Pioneer Park.
Oh, okay.
And so it worked in with funding very well. So all the old heritage things that happened, for instance, with Doon Pirates, that was known, the big baseball team of the area. They had a flatbed and they went down Doon Village Road, and somebody in a what would I say? The fire truck came down Doon and Doon Village. So we went down Doon Village Road, and then there were there was one person who wrote a play about Homer Watson.
Okay.
And we got the students from Doon School involved to participate in the play. And somebody painted a mural of the coming of the settlers in the area. And
Where was that mural?
it went into the Doon Public School afterwards. We planted 3 trees, a pine, a maple, and I forget what the other one was, at Doon School. And then we had one pop fireworks at the end of this event. But we had, stage presentations and a heritage treasure hunt about Doon.
So all of this was part of your overall plan in terms of raising awareness of your community to the wider community and the politicians.
Right.
So you would have invited them into your festival?
Yes, and we even asked them to sit on a float and go down Doon Village Road.
So everybody could see who they were.
That was good. Yeah. And
this is way before social media and everything else, right? I mean, to reach out to people, right?
Absolutely. But there were a lot of people who, in their growing up years, knew of Doon because there was a place called Willow Lake, which is now floodplain.
Okay.
And Willow Lake. And many people used to come out there from Kitchener, and there were little cottages around Willow Lake, and they would stay there. That was their summer.
Right.
And then I met someone recently who came and said, do you have any pictures of Willow Lake? No. He said, my mother and I used to come out there. Do you know there were 3,500 people on a weekend that come out to Willow Lake?
Wow.
So the wider community, people had really good memories of Doon.
Yeah.
And so that was a promotion. And then the next thing in this, how to convince council to deal with the road and preserve the heritage and the official plan said.
Yeah, and before we get to that, though, I just want to just step back for a sec because you're talking about Willow Lake and it's interesting. I just want to tie in something from a prior podcast that I had, and it's about this Waterloo Township. And it was with Ken Sealing. We were chatting, and I'm not even sure if Ken was 100% sure. I'm sure he knows where Waterloo Township was, but I didn't really gather. But so what I've learned from you is that Waterloo Township was an area that covered Doon, referred to as Waterloo Township, which is kind of interesting.
So you had, I don't know how that worked, but you had a township council, and then you had like these little, I don't know. Doon it didn't have a town center or anything, but it was a small little hamlet but there weren't, that I'm aware of, any.
And then when the region was formed, this is when Waterloo Township
ceased and desist.
Yeah, and became part of Kitchener.
Not all of Waterloo Township, no, because Hespeler was in Waterloo Township.
Oh, okay.
Hespeler, and I'm trying to think of what else. There's a little place, no one would know of it, but not too far, and it's where one of the schools was, Strasbourg, which is near the Huron Industrial Park.
Right.
And New Aberdeen, and Doon, and Freeport, I think, and like it swung around.
Yeah, it's sort of like Bridgeport.
Yeah, Bridgeport was in it.
Yeah, it was its own entity as well.
Yes.
So very interesting. Now, it just made me realize, because Doon Pioneer Park would be what we call South Kitchener,
Yeah.
right? And during my time as mayor, we went through, the federal government went through some changes on federal riding boundaries.
Right.
And one of the things we had advocated for at the time, because we were in North Dumfries, we wanted to stay part of Cambridge at the time, but they were almost going to attach North Dumfries. The original proposal was South Kitchener, North Dumfries, and a part of the county of Brant.
Right.
It was the original proposal, but I went forward, in the federal or the provincial MPP at the time, Rob Leone, had asked me to make a presentation to see about keeping North Dumfries with Cambridge.
Yes.
And as part of that, then we had to figure out, well, the population base was too big. What was the alternative?
Yeah.
And we had proposed making Hespeler and South Kitchener as one federal entity.
And they would have been happy to do that.
Well, eventually, not initially. Eventually they did. But it's almost like that's the original Waterloo Township, so to speak.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I never realized that.
Part of it.
Yeah, part of it.
There's another section.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this morning I was looking through Elizabeth Bloomfield's book, and this is a good one for people if they're interested in the history of Waterloo Township. It's the title, History of Waterloo Township Through 2 Centuries.
Okay.
And starting from the 1800s to...
And you can get that at the Kitchener Public Library.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, now let's just jump back. I just wanted to throw that in there, and I never even thought about that federal riding tie-in. But, okay, so now you were just about to get into what are we doing with these politicians?
1984. So, where do we go from here? Now, the Ontario Heritage Act has come in 1979, I believe, and so that allows you a municipality not only to designate individual properties, but also heritage conservation districts.
Okay.
And so through my role as chair of the Waterloo Regional Heritage Foundation, I had learned about heritage conservation districts in a Meadowvale, I think it was Meadowvale Village near Kingston, which was similar to our Upper Doon.
Okay.
And Bayfield had one, and so...
Up by Goderich, Bayfield.
Yes. And then I'm trying to think, there's another in Brampton, not Brampton, but what is Hazel McCallion's?
Mississauga.
Sorry, that was Meadowvale Village. Berryfield was the one near Kingston, but
right.
Meadowvale Village, and had just had it. And it was very interesting because Hazel McCallion, she was very concerned about the heritage of that little community and said, "You're getting a heritage district."
Done deal with Hazel.
and so I was thinking, like, they were facing similar challenges to us because the population, housing development was around, and how, So we took it upon ourselves and took a few of our neighbors with us, and we went to visit heritage conservation districts. What were they like? And
let me just interrupt for a second. So this is 79. You're chair of this committee of the say it again, the committee?
This is 1984.
Oh, sorry, 84. You're chair of this committee
of the Waterloo Regional Heritage Foundation.
Okay, and the conservation district was in 84?
Okay. 1979.
Yeah, that's what got me
when
confused.
The Ontario Heritage Act came about,
right.
which enabled
Allowed
municipalities
that. Okay.
to have.
So what year were you? So was it in 84 that you started looking into it for Doon?
We did.
Okay, gotcha now. All right, perfect.
And we learned more about it. And I will say that there had been several heritage properties designated out in Doon.
Yes.
already.
Let me ask
Individual
you for a
property.
second. So
Yes.
this is 7 years after that line in the map you found. They still haven't firmed up that road?
It's still on the books as a collector road.
Okay. Still on the books.
On the books,
All right.
even though there's an official plan that says we will protect your heritage. And so how are we going to work on this?
So you're still fighting this thing?
We are.
Okay. So now we're in 84 and you've got this concept of a heritage conservation district. And I just want to point out, when I was mayor, we actually instituted a heritage conservation, the Greenfield Heritage Conservation District.
Wonderful.
Yeah, which was something I was really proud that we were able to do.
And it was similar to Doon because you had a mill.
Yes.
And then you had workers' housing.
The smaller workers' houses, yeah, in the area.
And maybe an odd bigger housing.
Sure.
But that road was similar to Doon Village Road. Like it's so similar.
Yeah.
You know. And
But anyway, let's just jump to it. So now you found. Are you gonna tell me you found an angle here in order
Yes.
to another quiver, another
another
arrow in your quiver?
All right. So, this is. Oh, I hope you edit my laugh out. So we're talking about Heritage Conservation District, and of course, with when you do something like that, then you as an owner in a district it's perceived that you have to give up some of your property rights.
Yes, that's always a concern for people.
That is.
Yes.
However, what are the advantages? So that's why we took it upon ourselves to go visit these different districts and
Yes.
hear presenters like consultants and architect consultants who talked about it.
Yep.
And then my fellow neighbors were able to go and talk to different people about the advantage
Yes.
of this. And is there some way to protect ourselves, protect the small rural road
Yep.
and the houses and the atmosphere, the ambiance, this rural village?
That is so key. I know with the one in Ayr on Greenfield, one of the biggest champions or advocates for it was, Mary Jean Page,
Yes.
who lives on Greenfield,
Yes.
and her property's heritage features as well. So she was the major advocate and champion for this. And
Right.
and speaking with your neighbors is such a key part of getting the overall acceptance to the concept.
Right. So there was a general agreement and understanding of what it could accomplish, and had gone to see other places that were similar to, as you know, Bayfield is
Yep, yep.
small place. Meadowvale Village, it's a small.
Yeah, so you visited all these
Yes.
areas.
And then came back, and so the next stumbling block, and then I'm making a presentation to the Heritage Committee, who were on board, and the councillor in charge of the committee was on board. But the stumbling block was, in those days, that you had to hire a professional planner to do a study
Yes.
to come up with it.
Yep.
And so the counselor for the ward said, there is no way I am hiring a professional planner and taking it out of the city coffers.
So it's the cost issue.
Because the developer has spent all this money on planners to get their subdivision ready.
That's because this is like, we're going on 7 years now. Now you're throwing in this new little angle.
So there was a back and forth between the counselor of the committee and the counselor for the ward. And the counselor of the committee said, Doon is important. We're getting it. And we will have a planner.
So it was in the budget.
So it came in the budget, and then we had to have we had a team hiring the people.
And this is an important point, a key point, and you'll know this too. The budget, and we've said this before, a budget tells you what a community is all about. And if it's not in your budget, it's likely not going to happen.
Right.
So that's a key point. You've got to get it in the budget.
And if I can digress.
Yes.
For those listening.
Of course you can.
Really, it's important to have a line item in the budget.
Right.
Because that's in the base budget and
Yes.
it's there every year.
Yeah, specifically stated in the budget is golden. Not
That's
coming
right.
out of some general coffers, because then
No.
you're competing with everything else in the world, and there's more demand than there is available funds.
Yeah.
That's why you need that line specific item.
Yeah. So I assumed that there was enough support
Yes.
around the horseshoe for getting this in the budget.
The city of
higher.
Kitchener Horseshoe.
City of Kitchener, yes.
Yes.
And so then we hired, and then it took about,
Oh, and just to
no,
stop for a sec. So
Yes.
there was, right? There was support for the city from the
Yes,
city of
yes.
Kitchener to include that.
yes.
Okay.
So then I think the study began in 1985. And then, of course, there were public meetings and so on. And then the consultant made a presentation. And it was the first time that everybody who was in the meeting felt that finally some professional recognized the value
Yeah.
of the heritage of the area.
It was giving almost a voice to what you've been saying for so long in a way that hopefully the politicians were appreciating it. Even though it's coming from you, it's almost the same thing, but now it's coming from a quote professional, and sometimes it's looked at or viewed differently.
Right.
So I have to ask though, the builder, are you working with the builder through all these years, or communicating with the builder? How are you dealing with that?
I'm sorry, this is kind of a blank, but it seems to me that there was always some kind of a proposal coming from the developer, and then planning would have a meeting, and we would always say, but the area is under study. And how can we move forward until we know what is of value and needs to be studied, because there will be a result and recommendations with respect to
And when you say under study, you're talking about heritage study.
our area
Yeah.
as a potential heritage.
So this potential conservation district,
Yes.
heritage, would the quote collector road be coming right through that? If
It's still on
that
the
was
books.
the area.
So
Okay.
in the recommendations, there are a heritage conservation district study guideline. When it's completed, it becomes a bylaw. And so there's the preamble of the history of the community, what's wonderful about it. And then there's certain specific regulations. And one of the areas of note, the landscaping is really significant in Schneider Creek. That was highlighted in that area as well,
Yes.
along with houses of importance. There are 20 what are considered heritage and architectural #1,
Yours would be
Correct.
one of those, correct?
except mine is already designated.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Now, the act has changed, so it's all part and parcel.
Sure.
But then there was the area, the section on transportation. And so it wasn't just the Doon Village Road, but there was also little roads like Tilt Drive and Oregon Road and some of these others that were slated for widening and so on.
Right.
But anyway, so the consultant recommended that these be retained as local tar and chip roads, and that the Doon Village Road become a local road. And then when the subdivision starts, that it would the traffic would have to stay off Doon Village Road and go in not through our village, but
Right.
the road was to become a local road.
So they would have to find there has to be a collector road somewhere though, no?
True.
Yeah, so they found okay, so let me
But
ask
there
you then.
was,
eventually.
there was a road for around the village.
Yeah, we won't jump ahead though, because I want to ask you. So how did the city council react to this presentation from the consultant?
Well, the bylaw passed, but
When you say the bylaw to create,
so in other words, the
district.
district was approved. It was approved, and in former years, at the time of our district, we had to go to the Ontario Municipal Board and defend it.
was it opposed?
Uh, did I see any? I can't recall that there was any opposition.
Okay. The builder didn't oppose it?
There wasn't any, not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
that I can remember.
Right.
And so it went ahead, and then it was formally approved in January of 1989. So now we have this.
We're like 12 years.
Okay, so now we have this, it says local road.
Yes.
And of course, but what are we going to do with a developer? And so there was a secondary plan that came, but I think there was somehow that at that time, I can't remember how it went, but I know there was a lot of discussion and there were meetings, and then the road was downgraded in the official plan along with these other roads, local road.
Right. So more in line with what the consultant, or more in line with the Heritage Conservation District recommendations.
But there was still the fact that the developer wasn't about to back off, because Monarch was supposed to build this road around the village, and Doon Village Road would be ended where the
So
road
a
went.
road was built around.
Right, but not. All right. So the development started from Homer Watson Boulevard, and then we went in. They built Doon South Drive,
Okay.
and then Phase 1, and so there was still, like in the heritage plan, it said no construction traffic and all had to go out
Right.
on Doon South
Yeah.
Drive there. And then when Phase 2 came along, they continued on.
Right.
And then I don't think that Phase 3, that road, came about until 2004 or so.
But to sort of summarize, when you found out about this in 77, organized all these events, did all these presentations, did tours of educated people about the significance of your area, educated the politicians about the significance of your area, and found out, the heritage, I'm going to say angle, but it was a key point in your success, I would say.
Yeah.
And so by 89, then it was pretty well done. Once that conservation district came in, that was it, wasn't it?
You should think so. However, it wasn't out of the main plan.
Okay,
that
so you still had
Doon
to fight
Village
that.
Road was a collector road.
Okay.
It's still on the books.
Not today.
No, not today.
So how long after 89 did you get that changed?
Probably, now this is kind of a blank in here. Whenever the next official plan came about
Right.
for the city of Kitchener, and
Yes.
that probably was, somewhere in the 90s.
So you had to stay vigilant on this and advocate, because ultimately, just like we talked about a line item in a budget, you want to see the change in that schedule in the official plan,
Yeah.
right? So it no longer says collector, it says local road.
Right.
And then, yeah. Okay.
And make sure you have the right definition.
Yes. Yeah. Key. So did you hire, okay, outside of the consultant that helped you with the conservation district,
Yes.
did you have to hire a planner or anyone
Yes.
to advocate for you?
Yes, we did.
And how did you pay for all this? Collected money from the neighbors?
A generous donor. That's all I shall say.
Okay. All right. So, okay. Well, however, you found somebody that would help fund some of this, and that's what you got done. Otherwise, the alternative would be, as often happens, going to a lot of people in the neighborhood to see if they can contribute.
And the neighbors had to, show up at meetings and sign petitions, that kind of thing.
Sure. This is going to be sort of similar. I'm doing a podcast with Todd Cowan later, and we're going to be talking about gravel pits. And it's almost the same sort of situation in terms of neighbors coming together and trying to see what you can do. And I think the key here is you found something that you could, that helped put your thumb on the scale in the sense, and it was a heritage thumb on the scale in this situation, because it truly was something worth preserving. And you were able to convince the community that this was important.
Yeah.
And that you were successful that way. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, because you and I were talking about this, and I thought, what a serendipity sort of travel you've been on, taking it from Toronto, where you were with your husband who's off to law school, and you're teaching and going to school, and just happened to take some planning courses, and then get involved with the Spadina, Save the Spadina, and from Spadina to Spud, and here you are in Kitchener, finding yourself in a situation like that.
Right.
And so this is 89, early 90s, and you're teaching through all of this as well, correct?
True.
Full-time teacher, doing your thing, and then you retired around 95?
1996.
96. Okay. So, Jean, this is what we're going to do. We're going to end the podcast today.
Right.
Okay. Because this is basically the tale of the road. And
yes,
it was
and
a very interesting tale.
If I could elaborate,
yes.
I think that because of the road and the fact that the potential of a heritage conservation district helping to help, change this whole aspect of the road, we were very successful at getting everybody convinced to buy into a heritage conservation district.
Yeah. No, it was key. It's basically, I think it's great grassroots community advocacy, and it's a great story. So I thank you for sharing that with us today, and we'll have you back, because then we got to talk about your first campaign for municipal politics, running in the new Doon Pioneer Park ward in 1997.
Right.
And of course, we got to lead all the way up to where you met me in 2010. So we'll save that for the next podcast. Oh, one question I have. Do you still have that Iron Bridge picture that I gave you from the air? Do you remember the air?
Yes, I do. And it's on a wall.
Excellent. Anyway.
Yes, I do. And that, that's the other thing where I have, a great interest in saving the truss bridges.
Yes,
and
I know.
All the work.
I know. So we got lots to talk about, and I just want you to know I still have the beer glass you gave me. So anyway, you take care, Jean. Okay, so thank you again for listening to another edition of the Old Grey Mayors. My name is Rob Deutschman. I want to thank my friend Alex Kinsella for putting it all together and making the magic happen. And you, the listener, for taking the time to listen. And again, if you have any issue or topic or person that you think would be an interesting interview, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to make it all happen.